Hi there, it's Olivia-Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you a read it backwards video. And in this video we're doing a read it backwards for Percy Jackson and the Sea of Monsters, which is the second book in the Percy Jackson series. If you don't know what read it backwards is a series on my channel where I'm rereading some of my favourite series, starting from the last book going to the first book, and it's to look at whether I remember things, to see if there's foreshadowing, and just to track other patterns in the series when you read it the other way around. I've done this for the Twilight Saga and I'm currently doing it for Percy Jackson, so if you want to watch the installments for the rest of the series before you get to this one, I'll have links to all of them down below. But let's get started, and there's one thing that you need to know: this video contains
spoilers.
So the first thing that shocked me when we opened this book was that Percy knew Tyson before he goes to Camp Half-Blood in this one, and I knew that this was the book where Tyson appears for the first time, but I thought that they would meet in the camp rather than him knowing Tyson outside of school. But I find it very, very cute that they are already friends even before they realise that they're siblings. And of course there's dodgeball at the school and it goes terribly wrong because things always go wrong for Percy when it comes to school. But Annabeth's entrance was iconic, with her slashing through a monster and then saying, "Stay away from my friends." It was very sweet. I love the friendship between Annabeth and Percy. And then they have the Grey Sisters taxi ride that takes them to Camp Half-Blood, and I do remember this scene just because I remember finding it so iconic. By then I'd already watched Hercules, the Disney film Hercules, which is one of my favourite Disney films of all time. Cue my phone case that has the muses on it. And because of the fact that the Grey Sisters are in Hercules, and I find them so cool in Hercules, of course I remembered them in this book. Even though they're a little bit different, they've still got that same snappiness, sarcasm to them, and I just love that chaotic drive to get to Camp Half-Blood. And of course once they're there, there's a big fight and they realise that Thalia's tree is dying, and this is the book that I remember the most actually, because I remember why Thalia's tree is dying, who has done it, I remember what solves it, and kind of some of the adventures that they go on along the way to get there. I just have so many memories of this book, which is funny because I don't remember it being the best book. I don't think it was my favourite back in the day. My favourites were definitely 1 and 5, so the fact that I remember so much from second is kind of blowing my mind, but I'll tell you what I remember as we come across it rather than just blurting it all out now. I also just want to say that Tyson is such a ball of sweetness and joy and earnestness, and he needs to be protected at all costs. At all costs. Because I did mention when I was reading the third book that Tyson is just so sweet and genuine, but I feel like it's even more so in this book. He's just so innocent and so happy, and he just cares about Percy and wants Percy to be happy, and it's just the sweetest friendship ever. I just really love Tyson, and whenever I talk about the Percy Jackson series and I'm like, oh, it's found family, I'm always thinking about Percy and Annabeth and Grover, but I should really be thinking of Tyson as well, because he's definitely part of this whole found family thing, even if he's technically a half brother of Percy, which makes him actual family, but you know, we ignore those fine details. It's found family, okay? Also, how dare they fire Chiron because of this whole situation? Chiron, who has been a father to so many of these children, who has just done everything for this camp, how dare they fire him for someone to blame? And how dare they hire Tantalus instead? I have to say, even though Tantalus is like evil and he hates all the kids, his curse is actually so horrible. Imagine not being allowed to eat or drink but still living despite that and just feeling the thirst. Okay, now I'm thinking about the Cullens, but his curse sounds truly horrible. And along the way of reading in this section, I've realised that this is actually my favourite one of the reread that I've done so far. This is the book in this series that I'm enjoying the most. I've read a third of it at this point, and it's just so fun, and the things that they're going through are just enjoyable. The quest hasn't even started yet, but I am enjoying this one loads more than any of the others that I've reread, which I just find very interesting. I'm also just realising how young they are in this book, because there's like no hint of the romance whatsoever. They're too young for that, and Percy's just still such a child, and it's quite cute to see, but wow, these kids really grow up over the course of this novel. And that said, there was a moment where something's like taped to Clarissa's back and she doesn't realise that it says like, "You moo girl" or something like that, but I remember when those were the kinds of like funny things, petty funny things that you used to do, and I would like to think that children of this day and age have like moved on. At least from when I'm working in the primary school, I don't see anybody really doing that kind of thing anymore. I feel like it's outdated, but I just clearly had such flashbacks. It never happened to me, and I don't think we did it to many people, but it was a thing, and you always saw it on TV shows and stuff like that. And then they find out that Tyson is actually Percy's half-brother, and I feel like it's a little bit on ableism. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it, but Tyson only has one eye, he's seen as like a monster, and he's seen as really dirty and all of this stuff, and they do talk about his appearance quite a lot and how his appearance is different, and he's getting teased based on his appearance and him being like big and strong, but also just being quite young in terms of mentality, because he's a baby Cyclops despite his, you know, huge bulk. And I can't help thinking about disability and ableism in terms of Tyson's bullying and his story, and the fact that Percy finds out that he's the brother and feels ashamed. And, you know, I'm always thinking of content warnings a little bit in the back of my mind when I'm reading, simply because I try and keep them in my videos, so I couldn't help thinking, is this ableism? Can I mark it as that? So I just can't help but think of those themes, and I wonder if anybody who's read this think, yes, it can be seen as like an ableism and disability discussion. And this is when the empathy link is made between Grover and Percy. I was wondering when that was in the series, because throughout all the books I've read backwards so far, Percy keeps mentioning, oh, the empathy link I have with Grover, but I thought it was going to be a big deal when it was made, because of the fact that the empathy link has such a big consequence. Like, if Grover dies, it says that maybe Percy will just be in a vegetative state for the rest of his life, which I think is personally a pretty big deal. But they're just kind of casual about, hey, he's made an empathy link so that Percy can help him, and that's that, and I guess, and it just seems very casual, which I didn't expect. And then Clarissa's the one who's sent to go to the Oracle and to be running this quest, and it just makes me remember things about the story, because I think this is the book where Percy and Clarissa start to have a bit of an amicable truce. I wouldn't say they become friends, but they start to respect each other and get on each other's nerves a little bit less. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that develops, because I know that Percy's going to sneak off and do his own thing, but I think they reconvene with Clarissa at some point. And then the last thing I wanted to point out is just the sheer creativity in this book is blowing my mind. I've mentioned how all of these books are quite creative and how they reflect the mythology or take twists on the mythology, but I just have to say it again and reiterate it because it's just done so seamlessly well. I loved the moment where the Sea of Monsters is said to be the Bermuda Triangle area, pure genius, and then also the whole part where Hermes comes in and he's got those two snakes, Martha and George, on his phone, and intermittently while talking to Percy he's also dealing with, you know, people wanting deliveries. One is is it Atlas, the person who's like, no, it's not Atlas, the person who's like tied and there's a vulture always eating his insides. Maybe it is Atlas, I can't remember my Greek mythology, what a shame. He wants a delivery which is a gift to humankind, and Hermes says they have so many of them and he can't ignore Demeter because otherwise all the flowers will wilt that he usually delivers. All of these small fine details just make this story what it is, and Martha and George bickering was just cute. There's quite a lot of bickering in this one because we've had the Grey Sisters and then the snakes, but I just love every single moment and I'm just really enjoying this fun creative ride. I've only got 40 pages left of the Sea of Monsters and I realised I haven't given you an update since, so let's talk about what has gone down. So the first boat that they ended up on was the Princess Andromedea, and this is the first time we see the Princess Andromedea, and I didn't realise that boat was in the series for so long because it's there in the final book, which means it went through 4 books in the series. That ship is in 4 books. But I was also very confused because my main memory of this book is of Annabeth and Percy in a boat, just them two, and it was like a smaller boat. So I was like, what is going on? Why are they going to Princess Andromedea? Why is Tyson with them? I was very confused. Of course, it all straightens out later on and I understand why I had that memory because my memory was not wrong. But we'll get there, we'll get there. On the Princess Andromedea, Luke takes Percy and Annabeth captive. So yeah, Luke, Annabeth and Percy have a fairly civil conversation, and that's how you know it's early on in the series, because Luke and Annabeth and Percy, while they're all enemies and you see all of the, you know, tension in between them is still there, they still have hope that Luke might change his mind, and the fact that they still have hope just goes to show where on his journey of being evil Luke is. Percy keeps mentioning that Luke tried to kill him, and he also mentions that he's been to the underworld, and I'm wondering if this has to do with the flying shoes. I vaguely remember that. It could be something from the films, but I'm hoping I'm wrong, and I'm hoping it's something from the books. Read It Backwards, Olivia-Savannah in the first book will update you on whether my memory was correct on that or not. Oh, also I cracked up so hard. It's not even such a funny moment, but there's a moment where Percy and Annabeth are trying to send an Iris message to Chiron, and Chiron's with his family, and we all know that his family are partygoers. It's his type, they are all partygoers, and he's just trying to send this serious Iris message, but you hear like woohoo, party hard in the background, and I don't know why, but my 22-year-old self cracked up so hard. I just found it hilarious. So somewhere along this journey, Annabeth is talking to Percy about what Thalia is like, and she keeps mentioning that Thalia was so similar to Percy that if they met in real life they would either be best friends or deadly enemies. And I just felt like that was a fun bit of foreshadowing, because as we know, as we read this backwards, the next book is all about how Percy and Thalia struggle to get on because they're both so headstrong and they're both so similar. So I like that tidbit of foreshadowing in there. And the way that they have this conversation is that they send Tyson out to get some donuts, and then Tyson manages to find donuts in the wilderness, and I don't know why. Again, I just found that to be hilarious. And also it was like monster donuts, and I love donuts. Like, I really love donuts. So when I was just talking about the donuts, I don't know why I was cracking up and wishing I had donuts, and then it turns out that chains like, I don't know, Starbucks and KFC, like chain shops like that, are bred by monsters, and it's just so funny and so creative. I just love when Rick Riordan is so creative. I have a glimpse of a moment where we see that Ares, the god of war, is kind of threatening to abuse Clarisse when talking to her, and I remember that Percy has a fight with Lord Ares, and it mentions that in the third book as well, so we know that Percy and Ares aren't on good terms. But I did not remember that Ares was actually like not a good person. Like the way that he threatened to hit Clarisse, I was like, excuse me, you're not in my good books. And that was kind of shocking just because I didn't expect it in this book. To get to the Sea of Monsters, they have to sail between these two monsters, and they describe one that has the power of the whirlpools, whatever she's called, as an orthodontist's nightmare because of her teeth or whatever. And it was just a description that was so fitting for a middle grade book, because at least in the Netherlands everyone gets their braces around ages 11 to 12 or whatever, because it's free, I think. So it's just, the description was perfect for this book because it was perfect for the audience, and I really liked when that happened. There was another moment where it's just a small moment where they end up at this spa, which is Cersei's spa, and they're questioning Percy's look because he's growing up, he's getting pimples, he's changing, and they just referenced that, and it was not a big theme in the novel or anything, it was just a small moment, but again, it was just so perfect because there are so many teenagers out there that will be able to relate to it, so many preteens and children who can relate to it, perfect for the audience, and I just love seeing those moments where it fits in. I was so happy with the Cersei scene. Like, as soon as we met Cece and she was by a loom and there were guinea pigs around, I was like, it's Cersei, and I was happy because Madeline Miller, she really made me a fan of Cersei. She really did that with a single book. So of course when I saw Cersei being referenced in here, I was like, you go girl, even though she's supposed to be like the villain in this one. And when Cersei was talking about females who are admirable, she was talking about Medea but also about Calypso, and I just found that to be a bit bittersweet because later on in the series, as we read it backwards, we know Percy does end up on Calypso's island, and Calypso does not seem like the pinnacle of femininity and, you know, a great female icon. She's just really sad and she's really lonely, and she's not upset, but she's just pushing by, which I guess is a strength in itself. But paralleling that image I have in my head of Calypso lonely on an island in this Percy Jackson world compared to how Cersei is describing her just seemed like such a difference, and it was quite striking. There was also a moment where all of the guinea pigs turned back into humans and Blackbeard was there, and Blackbeard was the son of Ares, And I was just like, of course Blackbeard is the son of Ares. We stand the creativity that Rick Riordan creates. This was the book where I figured out that I was a daughter of Athena, not because I was thinking, oh, these are all traits that Athena has, more so because I was thinking I relate to Annabeth so much in this one. Annabeth's on a boat with Percy and she's getting seasickness, and I was like, yep, that's me. Annabeth and Percy are going through the sirens bit and she's like, I want to listen, I'm curious, I want to learn more. And I was like, that would also be me. I would totally risk my life to listen to the sirens because I'd be curious if there was a way to do it safely. And that was the scene that I really remembered, and it makes sense why I don't remember Clarisse or Tyson being part of this scene because they're not there. So my memory was correct. It's just Annabeth and Percy on a boat, and yeah, it was just a nice scene to remember. And I definitely remember it because Rick Riordan's series was where I learned a lot of vocabulary, and Annabeth's greatest fatal flaw is hubris, and I didn't know what hubris meant. I went and looked it up. I remember doing that. So kind of like how I learned epiphany from reading Twilight, I learned hubris from reading Percy Jackson and the Sea of Monsters. And so far things have happened. They've gone to the island, they've fought the giant Cyclops, and they've got the Golden Fleece and they're trying to escape. I don't really have much to say on those chapters. It was nice to see them working with Clarisse, and I know that later on they kind of have a truce with Clarisse, like they're not best friends but they get along well enough, and that's because of this scene. And I did remember that all of them worked together and the whole Clarisse is a bully thing got kind of resolved in this book. So I did remember that. I did really remember what happened on the island. It was very vivid in my mind. Honestly, this is the book of the whole series of Percy Jackson that I remember the most, and currently it's my favourite one. I'm just reading it and enjoying it. So the first thing I want to say is that Luke is just still so innocent in this book. He mentions that the plan is for them to go and get the police and everything, and then he's going to give it to them so that they can go and save camp. Of course he doesn't know Kronos' extra plan, which is for Thalia to be freed from the tree so then she can be the one who's in the prophecy. But the fact that he's just so innocent and believes that he can help Kronos and defeat the gods while still keeping all of the campers safe and all of the demigods safe just goes to show that he's still pretty young in this book, and he's still not as evil as he gets later on in the books. But I wonder how old he is, because it doesn't mention in this book and I don't remember how old he is from the first book, so I guess I'll see that very soon. And then on the Princess Andromedea, Percy tricks everybody so that they can see that Chiron is innocent, and also the Centaurs come and they save the day when Percy needs rescuing and his friends need rescuing. And I have to say, I just love the Centaurs. I think they're some of my favourite families in this book, creatures, just because they just come in and they're just all party animals and they're kind of silly, and I love them. I just love them, I just do. And also we do have to say that Kronos' plan for them to get the fleece and tricking them into getting the fleece and just ensuring that they do so that Thalia can be freed, that was a smart plan. I like when the villains are actually very smart. Percy also has a conversation with Chiron where he understands that Chiron's father is Kronos. I knew this later on in the books, especially the last book, so I knew it from my first read backwards because Chiron faces Kronos and that's his daddy. But I was not really thinking about the implication of that. I can't really imagine what childhood Chiron has had in the past, but it's also so hopeful to see that Chiron is such a leading figure and father figure to so many of the demigods. So Chiron's definitely doing something right regardless of which childhood he had. And Percy also mentions that he sees the Fates cutting a string in the first book at some point, and how he thinks it's a sign of his death at some point. And I remember that scene. I remember it happening before he gets to camp, so he's really confused about what these Fates are doing, cutting the string in front of him or whatever. I think it happens before he gets to camp. We'll see that when we do the final read it backwards for the Percy Jackson series, but I'm curious to see if I'm right in where I remember it happening. And also in the later books we see Tyson's shield that he made for Percy as a gift. We see it save his life in the third book, and it does foreshadow the fact that it's going to save Percy's life at some point. But also we got to see the details in this book of all the memories that he's like engraved into the side of the shield, and it's just such a sweet gift. I'm telling you, homemade gifts, I'm not good at doing them, but homemade gifts where people have taken the time to make it and personalize it for you are the sweetest things. I have a best friend who does that. She's so creative and I love her so bits. Also, wow, talk about a brutal ending cliffhanger. Thalia comes out the tree and she's like, I'm the child of Zeus. And then the book ends there. If I was a child, I'd be like, give me the third book now. Well, even if I wasn't reading it backwards, I should say, I'd be like, give me the third book now. And I really, really liked that ending and how it was a cliffhanger, but it wasn't too cliffhangery. Perfect. Neat. So that's the end of The Sea of Monsters, and I have to say this was my favourite book in this reread series so far. I predict I'll like it more than the first one, which I still have to read, I would rate this 4 stars if I read it now. So I feel like none of the books in this series are going to get 5 stars. Does that still make it a favourite series? I think it still is, just because I know that when I was younger I probably would have rated many more of these 5 stars. So it's always going to be a nostalgic favourite series, although maybe it's not a currently favourite series, and I will always love the world and all of the creatures and creativity that Rick Riordan has made in this series. But that was it for my Sea of Monsters Read It Backwards. Thank you so much for joining me. Please let me know if you've got any opinions or comments that you want to say on anything that I said in this video, and let me know, do you get seasick or don't you get seasick? Because there must be more people out there who do. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't you forget to hit the notification bell if you want to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior. I should hold it over there for the lighting reasons. Yes?
Oh, sorry.
Bye. Wish them well for me.
Have you done any work today, Olivia?
This work will happen after this.